Are UFOs hostile? We have so much to explore today. I'm sure you're all familiar with the congressional hearing that was held several days ago, or more than that now, where David Grusch released information saying that there are UFOs, UAPs, non-human intelligence biologic, aka alien bodies, etc. A lot of very interesting, groundbreaking things. Now, today we're going to be diving into this further because it seems like every day more and more information comes out. So we have so much to look at today. We're going to be taking a look at some more reports coming in having to do with Russian encounters, alien or UFOs or UAPs manipulating nuclear codes. We're going to be looking at information from Dr. Stephen Greer, and what's really important that what we're going to be looking at as well is information coming from the Law of One. Now, what is the Law of One? The Law of One is information that was channeled in the 1980s by a research team known as LL Research, channeling an interdimensional entity that calls itself Ra. Now, we're taking a look at this information because in it describes negative entities known as the Orion group that are intent on enslaving humanity. And they describe their craft, the way that their craft look and their methods of enslaving humanity. And I wanted to discuss it because it's very, very synchronistic. We were just looking at it just last week, and then all this stuff happens. So I think it's a good time to talk about this information. And we're going to see, you know, are UFOs, UAPs hostile? Are they not? And I'm going to tell you right now that I think it's a lot more intricate than most people think. I think people are looking at this the wrong way. Like I said, when I look at this sort of stuff, I look at it in terms of interdimensional beings and reality being holographic, an internal generation of frequencies. And it's a lot more complex than just what I think a lot of people think in terms of Hollywood depictions of aliens. So we're going to be taking a look at this, all this information and more. One quick thing that I have to say before we get started, and that is, remember that we always want to stay skeptical with this information. I always try my best to research this stuff as much as I can. However, a lot of stuff is coming out very, very, very quickly. So I'm not able to do as much research as I would normally like. So I want to put that out there that we need to, you know, be open-minded, but always remain skeptical. And when it comes to the information that we're looking at today, and including the Law of One material, and when it comes to Law of One material, it could be real, or it could be made up, or it could be a manifestation of the unconscious. This is stuff that we're going to be looking at today that's important to, just want to always reiterate, be open-minded, but to stay skeptical as well. So, if you're new to my channel, please like and subscribe. I have a lot of content about information regarding stuff like this that we've been talking about for years. So like and subscribe. There's a lot on my channel that you're going to like. And we're going to be continuing to talk about this next week as well. And wait till I tell you what next week's topic is, because it has to do with I think something very unexpected that these beings are. It has to do the relationship between negative entities and religion. I don't know if we're going to get it. Maybe we'll get into that tonight, but probably we'll save that for next week. I'm not sure. Anyway, it's very, very interesting when it comes to kind of like psychological warfare. And that's what I'm going to be talking about a lot today, having to do with psychological warfare, things like religion, etc. So let's see, a couple things. Make sure that you don't fall for any scams. There's a lot of scams in the comments, people saying that they're pretending to be me, saying to join my WhatsApp or Telegram. Don't fall for that. It's not me. There are a lot of people and groups out there that don't like what I'm doing, don't like what we're doing, and don't want this information to get out there. So they're spreading a lot of disinformation and misinformation about me and us and all that kind of stuff. So be smart, don't fall for the BS, stay rational. All right, let's jump into this. The first thing that we're going to be taking a look right now is, and we have, like I said, so much to talk about, it's kind of hard to know where to begin. But the main topic today that we're discussing is, are UFOs / UAPs hostile? So the first thing that we're taking a look at is new information coming out about interaction with UAP interactions with Russian military. So let's take a look at this.
Of course, News Nation continues to bring you the very latest as more bold claims come out about UFO sightings from high-ranking sources. Well, now an investigative journalist who has researched and reported on UFOs for more than 2 decades now says the Russian military engaged with UAPs dozens of times, even chasing them and shooting at them. This comes in the aftermath, of course, of this week's historic congressional UFO hearing that saw whistleblower David Grusch testify that the U.S. has been aware of non-human activity for nearly a century.
Do you believe that our government is in possession of UAPs?
Absolutely, based on interviewing over 40 witnesses over 4 years.
And now I know most of you have probably seen this already, but this is not what I really want to get into. This is just, you know, in this particular news thing, they're refreshing you, but trust me, there's more to it than just this Congress portion that most of us have seen.
Why is it that you refer to the phenomenon as non-human intelligence? Why deviate from the basis of extraterrestrial life?
I think the phenomenon is very complex, and I like to leave an open mind analytically to specific origin.
And this is very important. Please keep that in mind, that he says non-human intelligence, and he does this on purpose to keep an open mind as to their origin. Earlier in the congressional hearing, he spoke about the possibility of them being interdimensional beings taking advantage of the holographic principle, reality being based on holographic principles. That's going to be important for what we talk about later when we start talking about these negative entities that are intent on enslaving humanity, because I think that it's a lot different than most people think. It's not as how it's depicted in movies and television, but we'll get to that. Let's keep going here.
So the Pentagon has denied Grusch's claims. But tonight, News Nation has learned that investigative reporter George Knapp, who attended this hearing, has submitted a statement to Congress about Russian military engagements with UAPs decades ago. Of course, we want to bring in News Nation senior national correspondent Brian Enton, who's been tracking this for several weeks now. Before we get into the details of this letter, who is George Knapp? What is his level of experience? What do we know about him?
So George Knapp is a highly respected investigative journalist. You can actually see him in some of that video sitting right behind David Grusch to the left of him.
And what this is leading up to is a paper that was submitted to Congress by Knapp, which is going to get into basically UFO or UAP interference with Russian military codes. Russian nuclear codes. So this individual is just explaining who Knapp is.
And he's been studying UFOs for literally decades. He actually works for our parent company. He works for the News Nation station in Las Vegas. He's been reporting on UFOs for years. He's been in touch with lawmakers for years. But what's interesting about these new developments with him is this is information that he submitted to the congressional committee on the record. He submitted these letters to the committee under oath, essentially. So these are now part of the congressional record. So it's not like this is just some blog post or some story that's out there. This is now part of this committee's congressional record.
So what does this letter actually say? Because probably the most shocking allegation is he talks about dozens of engagements between the Russian military and UAPs.
Yeah, it's pretty shocking. I've been going over it. This just came out after the hearing on Wednesday. So this is new in just the last couple of days. He says, according to people in Russia who he met with, a program director there, they had a whole UFO program that they talked to him about that was going on in the 90s. A man named Boris Sokolov was in charge of the program, said there had been 45 different incidents where the Russians had engaged with UFOs. The warplanes even chased them, shot at them. And he claims that the Russians told him that there was actually a time where 2 warplanes crashed during these encounters and 2 pilots were killed,
Wow.
which is unbelievable that they've been able to keep this secret for so long.
What is the kind of time frame on these encounters that we're talking about?
So he met with them in the 90s. There was a brief window, he says, where relations were good between the U.S. and Russia, where he was able to meet with some of these people who were in charge of the program and actually get some of this information.
What does he say about the American military's, relationship with UFOs, encounters with UFOs?
Similar thing. I mean, he says that this has been going on for years. He had a very close relationship with former Senator Harry Reid, that went back decades, where he says they worked together. There was a secret program that no one knew about that.
Okay, now I want to actually, so this guy is talking about George Knapp, who submitted a paper to Congress, I believe. Now, I'm going to read to you something from that report itself. And again, I want to remind you, look, I like to be thorough with my research. Just because of how fast everything is happening. I only found out about this a couple hours before the stream started. I'm not able to research this stuff as much as I would like to, so I just want to be completely transparent with you guys that I'm finding out some of this information on the fly, but I think it's important enough to talk about. But remember to always stay skeptical with this kind of stuff. But so this report, there's just one element that I want to read to you here. It says, as we learned, Russian leaders commissioned an unprecedented UFO investigation. The order went out to all units in the vast Russian military empire that any UFO incident or report must be fully investigated. Witnesses interviewed, evidence collected, and then all those materials were forwarded to an office inside the Ministry of Defense. The study lasted a full 10 years and was likely the largest UFO investigation ever undertaken. Thousands of cases were accumulated. Nearly all of the witnesses who were interviewed were military personnel. Many of the incidents described to me by the program's director, Colonel Boris Sokolov, were alarming. All right. So Sokolov said there had been 45 incidents in which Russian warplanes engaged with UFOs, chased them, and even shot at them. In most incidents, the UFOs shot away at unbelievable speeds. But in 3 incidents, the Russian warplanes were dibbled and crashed. 2 of the pilots were killed. After those incidents, the MOD, Ministry of Defense, issued a nationwide order that UFOs should be left alone because, in the words of a top air defense official, quote, they may have incredible capacities for retaliation. So basically they had these encounters with UFOs, they had their warplanes chasing them, shooting at them, but 3 of their planes crashed, 2 of the pilots were killed, and so they said, hey, don't mess with the UFOs, they have capacity for retaliation. So listen to this. Colonel Sokolov also shared information about an alarming incident at a Russian ICBM base in Ukraine. UFOs appeared over the base, performed astonishing maneuvers in front of stunned eyewitnesses, and then somehow took control of the launch system. The missiles aimed at the US were suddenly fired up, launch control codes were somehow entered, and the base was unable to stop what could have initiated World War III. Then, just as suddenly, the UFOs disappeared and the launch control system shut down. So that's pretty incredible. By the way, I think at the beginning of the stream, I said nuclear code. Now looking at this, it doesn't necessarily say nuclear, it just says ICBM. So, apologies for that. Like I said, a lot of this I'm coming into, looking at really fast right now. And so very, very interesting. Remember, always stay skeptical. You never know. Hey, these, Russian people at the ICBM station, they could have just been drunk or something and made it all up. You never know. Probably not, but that's what I'd say, be skeptical with this stuff. But very, very interesting nonetheless. So we have these reports coming in from, possible at least retaliatory capacity and the capacity to perhaps interfere with our missile control system. So this would seem to, wonder, okay, so in the line of our questioning today, are UFOs or UAPs hostile? This would maybe put that into question. Are they or are they not? So let's look at, let me see what we have to look at here, because there's a lot. Let's look at what Dr. Stephen Greer has to say. So Dr. Stephen Greer is directly asked if he thinks that these intelligences, non-human intelligences, are hostile. So let's see what Greer has to say.
Two-part question. The first one being, is there no hostility from another species because there's a higher governing species, or is it just the fact that there is no hostility whatsoever? How can we be sure of that? First question.
Everybody who... Two things here. So someone is asking Dr. Stephen Greer, do you think that UFOs or UAPs are not hostile, or that there is some higher governing species keeping them from being hostile? Now, I think that that's really important, because when we look at this channeled information about the Orion group and their intention of enslavement, it will be talking about a governing species sort of attempting to keep that species from doing that, or these beings from doing that. So I think that's important to keep in mind as well, because we're going to be talking about that today. But let's see what Greer has to say.
Who I know who has dealt directly with those beings have told me our own experience, and that is they are completely non-hostile. They have been portrayed as such, because how do you unite the world around a military response? You create a false alien threat. This is what Werner von Braun warned about.
So Greer is saying that, in his opinion, and people he's interviewed, etc., these are non-hostile, they are friendly, but they are being portrayed as hostile basically so that the military has an excuse to attack them. So Greer's opinion is that they are not hostile, non-hostile, but propaganda is making them appear to be hostile so that the military basically has an excuse to be able to engage.
And we are very much at that point, unfortunately. So I think that calmer minds need to prevail, but there is no evidence they are hostile. Now let me make one other point. As I said one time to a general, I won't say who it is, because if they were hostile, and given the galactically foolish things we have done, targeting them, striking them, now these systems that are faster than speed of light, moving out into space, the technologies they have in a fraction of a second could shut down all those systems and everything else. They have not. Why have they not done that? Because they are essentially very peaceful, highly organized, socially evolved, psychologically and emotionally evolved civilizations.
So he's basically saying they haven't wiped us out because they are highly evolved, psychologically evolved, emotionally evolved, and we're going to be addressing that. I think that's an important thing to. What I'm basically going to try and discuss today is, I think it's a lot more complex than what people are giving this credit for. It's a lot more intricate. So let's hear what else he has to say.
One other point, common sense. If you possess those sort of weapons and you're still of the consciousness of violence, you're going to blow yourself up or some nearby planet with you. Because we're not talking about, let's forget science fiction. You're not talking about boom, boom with a laser beam, right? Or a kinetic missile, or even a thermonuclear missile. You're talking being able to affect the fabric of space-time.
Oh, by the way, I have to say that just because I'm watching a video on Stephen Greer doesn't mean that I agree with this person. I have not done enough research on Greer at all to be able to say one way or another. Again, I want to reiterate to you that this particular video, this particular stream, is not as researched as I would normally have done, just because of the sheer speed of the information coming through. But we can at least see what he has to say and keep an open mind.
And then if those technologies are weaponized, it's over in a fraction of a second. So the proof, I said to one senior military guy, that they are not hostile is that you and I are still breathing the free air of Earth. If you know what we've been doing, it's quite clear that this is actually proof that they're not hostile. If you understand what those technologies are, and if you understand what covert illegal projects have been doing.
Okay, so again, to the point of Greer I don't know his credibility, etc. But one thing that I want to point out is he's essentially saying that if they were hostile, due to the sheer amount of technology and how capable they could be in destruction, he's saying the fact that we aren't all destroyed is proof that they're not hostile, because basically he's saying that we would all be decimated if they wanted to be hostile. Well, here's my opinion on that. My opinion on that is I think it's more complex than that. Let's say that you are a farmer and you have a crop. Are you going to go out and burn and destroy that crop? No, you're not. You have a use for that crop. So if aliens, and I don't like using the word alien, so, you know, Grusch uses non-human intelligence, and I think more in terms of interdimensional beings, not even typically as what's understood as aliens at all. There would be no point in a non-human intelligence species going around just destroying planets and destroying the human population. I think that if they are hostile, they're not hostile in a way that would normally be understood as physically violent. I think that they are instead interested in a use for humanity. And that is, like, we're going to take a look at this Law of One material, they're interested in enslaving humanity. And in my opinion, this hostility is not a hostility in terms of physical violence, but a hostility towards psychological warfare. I think that these beings, if they are hostile, are engaged in psychological warfare, not physical warfare. Why? Because I believe that they want minds to be on the same wavelength as theirs. I believe that they look at Earth as being a potential reservoir for minds that they can use to increase their power. And they do this by getting minds, beings, planets on the same wavelength as them. And we're going to be talking about exactly what that means, but this has to do with essentially manipulating the consciousness of humanity. And like I said, I don't know if we're going to be able to get into it today, but we absolutely will next week if we don't today, about the negative entities, what they have to do with the creation of religion in a certain sense. So I think this is going to make a lot more sense once we actually start jumping into the material itself. So let's actually do that. But before I do, like I said, in this material that we're going to read that talks about the Orion group and their intention to enslave humanity and how they do that through the mind, it also talks about their craft and what their craft looks like. So before we read that, I just want to one more time remind you all of this footage, and I'll start playing it right now. I know most of you have seen this footage already, but for those who might be new, this is the famous Tic Tac video released by the Pentagon of a UFO or UAP, and this is one of the pieces of evidence that was discussed at the congressional hearing last week. I believe it was last week now. And we'll just watch this and then actually start getting into it. So they are zooming in on the object. And thank you so much, Christopher. I see that, by the way. Thank you.
Dude, this is a fucking drone, bro. There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA.
So they said there's a whole fleet?
My gosh.
A whole fleet of them?
They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Look at that thing, dude. That's not our LNS though, is it? It's not. That is the LNS, dude. Well, if there's like... Look at that thing! It's rotating. Nickel 6-1 Tango Project, over. Oh, got it! Woohoo! Roger, there's troubleshooting as soon as I get... Did you box moving target? 02. No, I took an auto track. Oh, okay. Oh my gosh, dude. Wow, look at it fly!
All right, so that is the Tic Tac video. And one last thing that I want to show you is some recreations of what they think that it looked like. Is this here? Yeah, so can you all see that? Here is a depiction of what the pilots described it looking like. It's essentially just, you know, this Tic Tac oval type shape without any seams, without any windows. Pretty basic. Now, there's also been described, it's also been described, let's see, here's another object that's was described by the other pilot at the congressional hearing, which he described the object as being so these are different objects, not the same one, right? So this is a different time. He described it as being a black cube within a transparent sphere, all right? So that's a black cube within a transparent sphere. So this is just a depiction of that, and this one is another depiction of that as well, okay? So let's keep that in mind. That's going to be important in just a minute. But now I want to get into, just one moment here. Here we go. All right, so you should be able to see this on screen now. Now, these are the channeled sessions from the raw material. Now, this is, let me get back to where we were before. All right. So just to kind of set the picture for those who might be new, this is channeled information that comes from an interdimensional being that calls itself Ra, which is a group mind known as a social memory complex that is transmitting information to the LL research team, which is a team in the 1980s that contacted this being through, was it 108 channeled sessions, something like this, over the course of 3 years. Now, there is audio recordings of every single one of these sessions, I believe. And we're looking at the ones now where they begin discussing the Orion group. Now, according to Ra, the Orion group is a group of negative entities that are intent on essentially creating a hierarchy of dominance and power to increase their grip on the world, the universe, etc. Now, once again, as always, I want to say we need to approach things like this open-mindedly, but also with skepticism as well. We don't know. This could be made up, but it could be real, or it could be a manifestation of Carla's unconscious. Now, the channeler's unconscious, but I want to show you some of the similarities between some of the things that we have been talking about. So there's so to set the stage, there is a questioner. So someone's going to be asking the questions, and then this being responds through the channeler. Okay. So the question is, what do the Orion group have? What's the objective with respect to the conquest of the Orion group? Ra replies, I am Ra, as we have said previously, their objective is to locate certain mind-body-spirit complexes which vibrate in resonance with their own vibrational complex, then to enslave the unelite, as you may call those, who are not of the Orion vibration. Okay, so this is what's really important here. You have to see what's being talked about right now, what's being discussed is a lot more complicated than little green men and spaceships coming down and shooting laser guns off. They're talking about beings that are attempting to get humanity to adopt a certain worldview, adopt a certain way of thinking that aligns humanity's vibration with their vibration. In other words, their consciousness, humanity's consciousness with their consciousness. They're trying to get humanity's consciousness to match their own. Ultimately, for what purpose? To create an elite who rules and enslaves the non-elite. And the elite are those who are sort of working with the Orion group, whether they know it or not, whether they actually have contacted the Orion. So they basically it said that there are human beings in power who are essentially helping the Orion group. Now, how do they help the Orion group? By spreading information, to get humanity to that particular kind of consciousness that matches the Orion groups. Now, does that mean they're directly in contact with the Orion group? These people? Ra says, well, some of them aren't. Basically, that some of them may be in contact with the Orion group, but that essentially there are human beings in power that are pretty much already on their own getting humanity to the level of consciousness that the Orion group wants. And you can see that this operates in a very like power structure with negative hierarchies and things like this. We can basically look at the world at how it's being structured by the billionaire elite is pretty much what's being gotten at here. The billionaire elite create a negative power structure where a few are in control and dominate the will of others. And we can really see this, happen a lot through the domination of social media by certain rich elite billionaires who take control of communication. Because you control communication, what happens? You start to shape consciousness. You start to shape perception. Social media is the way to do that. And who owns these corporations? Rich elite billionaires. Okay. So the next question is, what do the Crusaders do? Ra replies, I am Ra. The Crusaders move in their chariots to conquer planetary mind-body-spirit complexes before they reach the stage of achieving social memory. Okay, now this is very interesting. And this type of information is why I'm saying that it's very... I'm sorry, I have an itch on my back that's at like one spot that I can't reach, and it's very annoying. It's probably the negative entities doing that to distract me. I'm just kidding, by the way. Some people don't know when I'm kidding, and it's kind of weird, but that's a joke. Anyway. So they're asking, what did the Crusaders do? Ross says the Crusaders move in their chariots to conquer planetary mind-body-spirit social complexes before they reach this stage of achieving social memory. This is important. This is an important sentence to understand, because this is really where we start to get into the idea of understanding the psychological warfare when it comes to consciousness evolution. So Ra refers to the vehicles of the Orion group as chariots. So when they say chariots, think of UFOs or UAPs. Ra refers to UFOs or UAPs as chariots. So the Crusaders, which are a specific type of Orion entity, move in their chariots to conquer planetary mind, body, spirit, social complexes. What does that mean? To conquer planets that have a group of conscious and sentient beings. And they do this before that planet and its people reach the stage of social memory. What is the stage of social memory? The stage of social memory is when humanity evolves to a point, or beings evolve to a point where they start working in such synchronicity that they form a network mind, that they form a interconnected group mind. And this is what we talk about in our system, in the Neogenian. There are different levels to consciousness. Right now, humanity is at self-aware stage. We're trying to get humanity to the next stage, the all-aware stage, or hyper-awareness. And then eventually what happens is that humanity, when it achieves a planetary civilization, which is what we're also trying to get humanity to do, is it will eventually start working together in such synchronicity and such cohesion, it starts to form a network mind or a group mind. Now, this does not mean that we lose our individuality. It means that in addition to our individuality, we have a global connection as well. You can kind of think of it like this. Imagine, 100 individual computers that are all connected via the internet and the cloud. The individual computers are still individuals, but they can share that cloud consciousness. And via that cloud consciousness, they're one group mind, one network, but still retain their individuality. Humanity is evolving towards a point where they will form a network mind and be able to have this dual mode of consciousness where they're individuals yet connected at the same time. Now, see, this is what we're trying to get humanity to do. Now, once again, for those who are new here, I just want to say that our system is separate and different from this material. It is up to debate whether this material is real, or this material is made up, or this material is a manifestation of the unconscious mind. Regardless, it's very interesting information to explore and to consider. And I like to point out the similarities that it has between what we talk about, just like we're talking about the similarities that are occurring in the world today. So essentially, according to Ra, these beings, known as the Orion group, specific entities called the Crusaders, move in their chariots, or UAPs, or UFOs, to conquer planetary civilizations, or just a planet that has civilizations on it, before they reach the stage of achieving social memory. So they're basically trying to stop or conquer the planet before it gets to the point that we are literally trying to get humanity to. We're trying to get humanity to the stage of a network mind. First by hyper-awareness, then planetary civilization, then evolving to a point where eventually we will reach a stage called holos independence, where we will be so synchronized that we will no longer require the physical world, and we will be able to create our own dimension and exist in our own dimension. And then we will be interdimensional beings. See, all these interdimensional beings are just at another level of evolution. They were all like us once. If at a certain level, we will be interdimensional beings. And this is how it starts. It starts first by us reaching the next level of consciousness, which is not just self-awareness, but all awareness or hyper-awareness. Then we form a planetary civilization. Then we form a network mind. Then we synchronize that network mind to such a degree where we can no longer have to rely on the physical, but it can establish our own, what's known as a CFD, or collective frequency domain, and create our own dimension through the manipulation of our eternal frequency patterns as being eternal beings of frequencies. Because we're not just bodies, we are eternal minds. We are souls. In our system, we call them zetas. Zetas are beings of eternal frequencies. It's an infinite being. It's a single being that contains infinite frequencies that all voids to zero. So we are a complete system of energy as beings of frequencies. Bodies are just what we use to navigate the physical world. There are vehicles. But eventually we will evolve to a point where our minds as zetas are in such synchronicity, we'll no longer have to tune into the physical domain. We'll be able to create our own dimension, our own CFD. And eventually, and at that point, we will be the interdimensional entities. So essentially, the Orion group is trying to conquer a planet before it gets to that point. So you really have to look at planets as seeds. Planets are seeds for consciousness. Planets provide an environment for us to be able to evolve to the point of being a subnetwork mind that established its own dimension, and then we'll no longer have need for the planet, and the planet gets it's essentially like the husk of a seed, because we won't even be associated with the planet anymore. So you can think of it kind of like these other interdimensional beings look at us kind of like in the stage of growth and growing, where positive entities want us to grow fully and completely and reach that stage. Perhaps, you know, there's always, I'll get into that later, but this is the claim anyway. Whereas negative entities want to stop that from happening and sort of take that energy and convert it to their own frequency so that we can become part of their empire. According to this material, that's what's happening here. So you can see how it would not be beneficial for, you know, like Dr. Greer said, oh, well, if they were hostile, they would just wipe us all out. Well, they're not going to wipe us all out if their intention is to convert our consciousness to be compatible with theirs. That would be, like I said, going to a farm and just burning up all the crops. That's not what they're to do. So let's continue here. So the questioner says, then we have crusaders from Orion coming to this planet for mind control purposes. How do they do this? And see, this is exactly right. This is what I'm saying. This is psychological warfare. This is not physical warfare, at least according to this. So Ra states, as all, they follow the law of one, observing free will. Contact is made with those who call. Those then upon the planetary sphere act much as you do to disseminate the attitudes and philosophy of their particular understanding of the law of one, which is service to self. These become the elite. Through these, the attempt begins to create a condition whereby the remainder of the planetary entities are enslaved by their own free will. This is really important. Let's go over this. By the way, I want to say, if you saw last week's talk on this, I'm rereading a couple of the very last points because this is important for what we're going to be talking about. So some of this sounds like I read this already. I did a couple of these before, but this is important. So what's going on here? The questioner says, okay, so Orion wants to control people's minds. Now, not literally, that's not what's actually happening. They're trying to convert their consciousness to be on their same wavelength as theirs. Anyway, the questioner is saying, how do they do this? What does Ra say? Ra says, well, they have to obey the law of free will. And the reason why that they have to obey the law of free will is because what are they trying to do? They're trying to literally convert consciousness to match theirs, okay? So think about it. If I, okay, so here, let me explain it this way. These negative entities are trying to get humanity's consciousness to match theirs. Now, think about like, okay, so for example, what I try to do is get humanity to raise their consciousness. I want humanity to reach the next level of consciousness, right? Can I force you to do that? Can I force you to reach the next level of consciousness? No, I can't. I can give you the tools and I can try my best to help you out. But ultimately, that's something that you have to do yourself. You have to do the work yourself to reach the next level of consciousness. So what these entities are trying to do is sort of prevent humanity from reaching a certain type of consciousness and instead convert it to their consciousness. But they can't force humanity to do that. It's not possible. So so basically he's saying that they follow the law of free will. You're not able to, you can't capture someone, enslave them and go, okay, you're going to have a new level of consciousness now. Or a different level of consciousness, or you're going to believe this thing. No, you can't do that. It's something that has to happen via free will. So Ra continues, excuse me. Those then upon the planetary sphere act much as you do to disseminate the attitudes and philosophy of their particular understanding of the law of one, which is service to self. Ra is saying, hey, just like you guys, talking to the questioner, are trying to get people to raise consciousness by spreading information, people on the planet spread information to try and get people to turn to Orion's type of consciousness. These become the elite. Through the elite, they begin to create a condition whereby the remainder of the planetary entities are enslaved by their own free will. So, in other words, the elite are trying to spread a philosophy or way of thinking where the rest of the population also adopts that way of thinking. Propaganda, spreading information, trying to get people to think a certain way. So Don says, can you name any of the recipients of the Crusaders? That is, any names that might be known on the planet today. Like, can you give me some names of some of the people who are actually doing this, who are spreading this philosophy? Ra says, I am Ra. I am desirous of being in non-violation of the free will distortion. To name those involved in the future of your space-time is to infringe. Thus we withhold this information. We request your contemplation of the fruits of the actions of those entities whom you may observe enjoying the distortion towards power. In this way you may discern for yourself this information. We shall not interfere with the, shall we say, planetary game. It is not central to the harvest. So essentially what they're saying is, hey, we can't tell you, we can't give you names. This is in violation of the law of free will. It interferes with harvest. And this they call harvest humanity reaching different levels of consciousness as harvest. So basically we can't name any people, but Ra's basically saying, but hey, look, just look at those who have power and you can figure it out for yourself. It's pretty obvious. That's essentially what they're saying. And yeah, it's pretty obvious. If you look at those in power and they're disseminating a certain way of thinking, a certain philosophy, a certain state. Now, this doesn't mean that they're directly in contact with the Orion group, necessarily, but it means that they are, without knowing it, getting humanity to the wavelength that the Orion group would want or prefer. So the questioner says, how do the Crusaders pass on their concepts to the incarnate individuals on Earth? So how does the Orion group pass the information to these people so that it can be spread? I am Ra. There are two main ways, just as there are two main ways of, shall we say, polarizing towards service to others. There are those mind-body-spirit complexes upon your plane who do exercises and perform disciplines in order to seek contact with sources of information and power, leading to the opening of the gate to intelligent infinity. There are others whose vibratory complex is such that this gateway is opened and contact with total service to self, with its primal distortion of manipulations of others, is then afforded with little or to no difficulty, no training, no control. Okay, so essentially what Ra is saying is that some people actually do exercises and mental techniques to contact these entities, and others are just naturally on that wavelength themselves, and they're just naturally going out there and doing these things themselves. So basically they don't need to have this contact because they're already doing this. The questioner says, what type of information is passed on from the Crusaders to these people? I am Ra. The Orion group passes on information concerning the law of one with the orientation of service to self. The information can become technical, just as some in the Confederation, in attempts to aid this planet in service to others who have provided what you would call technical information. The technology provided by this group is in the form of various means of control or manipulation of others to serve the self. So basically, the information that the Orion group passes on is how to control and manipulate others via power structures of manipulation and control. Don says, I don't know if this is a short question or not, so can we save it till next time? But my only question is, why did the Crusaders from Orion do this? What's their ultimate objective? This is probably too long to answer. Ra replies, I am Ra. This is not too long to answer. To serve the self is to serve all. The service of the self, when seen in this perspective, requires an ever-expanding use of the energies of others for manipulation to the benefit of the self with the distortion towards power. So basically, what this means is the questioner is saying, why do they do this? And Ra says, well, the answer is simple. They have chosen service to self in their philosophy, which requires them to always be conquering and expanding. So okay, so here's the idea. What we want to do, for example, is create a united teleocratic planetary civilization. How do we do that? We create a purposeful world towards increasing the quality of life of every individual and the collective by giving people access to all the resources that they need, all the everything that one's all the healthcare they would need, all the consciousness information they would possibly need, everything that they need to be able to become the best versions of themselves and interact with each other in the best way possible to create a united planetary civilization. Okay, so it's about creating an interconnected society based on the mutual cooperation and helping of others. Right? So we learn and grow, and then we help others learn and grow. So our whole goal is that we want to create a teleocratic planetary civilization where everyone reaches the very highest apex of Maslow's extended hierarchy of needs, which is transcendence, which essentially means that everyone is working on their own self-actualization and helping others self-actualize. So now we have a feedback loop of people growing and learning and helping others grow and learn. All right, so this is our orientation. This is how we view reality as being unity. Orion, or negative entities, does so in a different way. Instead of helping and learning and growing together, they do so in dominance and power and hierarchies and control and battling each other. And you can just imagine, obviously, the system of power and dominance and control is a lot different from mutual growth. But you can create a unity in both, but one is just a coerced unity, a forced unity, a unity of that's very negative, and one is a synchronized unity of growth. So essentially, why does Orion do this? Well, because in that mindset, they have to constantly be conquering and enslaving to increase their power. So this is why they do this. So the questioner says, thank you. Continuing with the previous session, you mentioned that the Orion Crusaders come here in chariots. Could you describe a chariot? Okay, now here's where we get to really interesting information and related to all the UFOs and UAPs. Don wants, the questioner's name is Don, by the way, Ra to describe the chariots or these vehicles that are associated with the negative entities or the Orion group. The questioner asks, you mentioned that the Orion Crusaders come here in chariots or UFOs, UAPs. Could you describe a chariot? I am Ra. The term chariot is a term used in warfare among your peoples. That is its significance. The shape of the Orion craft is one of the following. Firstly, the elongated ovoid shape, which is of a darker nature than silver, but which has a metallic appearance if it is seen in the light. In the absence of light, it appears to be red or fiery in some manner. Okay? So they're describing the first type of craft as an elongated oval shape that has a metallic appearance if seen in the light. If there is no light, it appears to be red or fiery in some manner. The other craft include disc-shaped objects of a small nature, approximately 12 feet in your measurement in diameter. The box-like shape, approximately 40 feet to a side in your measurement. Other craft can take on a desired shape through the use of thought control mechanisms. There are various civilizations which work within this group. Some are more able to use intelligent infinity than others. The information is very seldom shared, therefore. The chariots vary great in shape and appearance. So intelligent infinity is basically the idea to access the fundamental energies of existence to be able to manipulate matter by thought. So what Ra is saying is that there's different types of craft. One of the craft is an elongated oval shape that appears like metallic in the light, red at night. That there is another that is disc-shaped, and another that is box-shaped. And that other craft can take on a desired shape through the use of thought control mechanisms. Essentially, that there are some Orion beings that are advanced enough to be able to manipulate matter via thought, and it can take on a desired shape. And so we're really getting into the idea here of, remember, we're talking about interdimensional beings and the manipulation of matter. So the questioner says, is there any effort by the Confederation to stop the Orion chariots from arriving here? So for those who don't know, the Orion is a group of negative entities, and according to the law of one, the Confederation is a group of positive entities. Ra claims to be a member of the Confederation, a sixth density social memory complex of the Confederation. This is what Ra states. So Don is saying, does the Confederation try to stop the Orion craft from arriving here? Ra replies, I am Ra. Every effort is made to quarantine this planet. However, the network of guardians, much like any other pattern of patrols on whatever level, does not hinder each and every entity from penetrating quarantine. For if request is made in light love, the law of one will be met with acquiescence. If the request is not made due to the slipping through the net, then there is penetration of this net. So basically, Ra is stating that the Confederation tries to keep Earth quarantined, basically away from any interference. But Ra says, like with any kind of patrol, there can be slippages of this. Don says, who makes this request? Ra says, I am Ra. Your question is unclear. Please restate. The questioner says, I don't quite understand. How does the Confederation stop the Orion chariot from coming through the quarantine? Ra replies, I am Ra. There is contact at the level of light form or light body. There is contact at the level of light form or light body being, depending upon the vibratory level of the guardian. These guardians sweep reaches of your Earth's energy fields, attempting to be aware of any entities approaching. An entity which is approaching is hailed in the name of the one creator. Any entity thus hailed is bathed in love light and will of free will obey the quarantine due to the power of the law of one. So Don says, the questioner says, what happens to the entity if he did not obey the quarantine after being hailed? Ra says, I am Ra. To not obey the quarantine after being hailed on the level of which we speak would be equivalent to your not stopping upon walking into a solid brick wall. Okay, so let's read that again. Just to restate this. So Ra says, I am Ra. There's contact at the level of light form or light body being, depending on the vibratory level of the guardian. So this is happening at the level of light. These guardians sweep reaches of your Earth's energy field, attempting to be aware of any entities approaching. So they're on patrol. They're on lookout for any approaching entities. An entity which is approaching is hailed in the name of the one creator. Any entity thus hailed is bathed in love light, and free will obey the quarantine due to the power of the law of one. And the questioner says, well, what would happen if they didn't obey? And then Ra says, to not obey quarantine after being hailed on the level of which we speak would be equivalent to your not stopping upon walking into a solid brick wall. So basically they have to, just like you can't walk through a brick wall at this level. If one is hailed in quarantine, they cannot penetrate. And the questioner says, what would happen to the entity if he did this? What would happen to his chariot? Ra replies, I am Ra. The creator is one being. So remember, according to Ra, all of reality is a single mind that they call the infinite creator. So all of us are expressions of this one mind. Every object, everything you see, everything you can touch, taste, hear, smell, every person, every mind, all of it is an expression of a single mind. So Ra says, the creator is one being. The vibratory level of those able to reach the quarantine boundaries is such that upon seeing the love light net, it is impossible to break this law. Therefore, nothing happens. No attempt is made. There is no confrontation. The only beings who are able to penetrate the quarantine are those who discover windows or distortions in the space-time continua surrounding your planet's energy fields. Through these windows they come. These windows are rare and unpredictable. So basically saying that the level of protection or quarantine that they place around the planet at the level of light is impossible to break. So there's not even an attempt to do it. There's no confrontation because even negative entities know that it's impossible to break it. The only way that negative entities can get through is through distortions in space-time. And through these windows and distortions in space-time, that's how they get through. These windows are rare and unpredictable. So that's very, very interesting. Again, look, I always want to remind you all, we need to be very skeptical of this. We don't know. This could all be made up, but it's very interesting. So it's interesting because if we're talking about interdimensional beings here, they're basically talking about arriving on Earth through distortions of space-time. And that these windows are rare and unpredictable. So basically it would mean that there wouldn't be a lot of these getting through. I mean, I'm assuming, that's my guess anyway. Now we also have to think about this as well. Just at the level of, we have to remember that so much of this can be occurring at the level, if it's real, at the level of the mind or the frequency domain. And that we can be thinking in terms of not like some kind of physical shield that spacecraft are trying to penetrate or something like this. But rather we could think of it almost as like a consciousness field, or even minds, the minds of these negative entities would be trying to penetrate to be able to affect consciousness and things like this. So we always have to think of in a lot grander scale than I think what a lot of people do when they're so used to Hollywood depictions of non-human intelligence. We're talking about interdimensional beings here, so it's very likely that this is also occurring at the level of just mind and consciousness and penetration of thought. So Don says, you mentioned that the Orion Crusaders, when they do get through the net, give both technical and non-technical information. We know what you mean by technical information, but what type of non-technical information do they give to those they contact? Am I right in assuming that this is all done by telepathic communication? I am raw. This is correct. Through telepathy, the philosophy of the law of one with distortion of service to self is promulgated. And okay, so this is very, God, I don't know why I have, it's very annoying. Okay. So this is very important what's occurring here. Is they're saying that the way that this information is getting across is through telepathy or mind contacting mind. There's no physical alien having conferences with people or anything like that. According to this material, this is happening at the level of mind, at the level of consciousness. These Orion entities are telepathically communicating a philosophy. What philosophy are they communicating? Well, the law of one. So the idea that reality is interconnected. But with the distortion of service to self, meaning that, oh, well, the way we should approach the idea that reality is interconnected is through power and dominance and control. So you see the difference here between two entities can both have the understanding that reality is connected, but they can have differing ideas of what to do with that information. According to the law of one, negative entities spread the law of one, that reality is an interconnected whole, but that with this information, power, control, and dominance of others should occur. Whereas what we talk about is the opposite, where we say, yes, reality is connected, and so we need to realize that we're all on this journey together and help each other grow, help each other learn, create a feedback loop of growth. So you see, that's a big difference and really important to understand. Negative entities. And the reason why I like reading the law of one is because it doesn't matter if this is real or not. There are negative people, beings, minds out there that want to enslave humanity through dominance and power and hierarchy and will in a way that's very negative. So regardless of if it's actually a specific group called Orion or not, doesn't matter. This is still very real problems. So in other words, but here's the difference. Like I said, our idea is a feedback loop of growth and actualization. This other idea is power and dominance and control. So do you see how both can form a unity, but in very different ways? One through power, dominance, control. The other through a feedback loop of growth. I'm growing and learning, and I'm teaching you, and they're growing and learning, and they're teaching me, and we're all teaching each other. We're building a better society, and through our learning, we can create an even better society, create improved initial conditions for the next generation, who then create, it's this feedback loop of growth, creating better quality of life for every individual and the collective, rather than a system of dominance, power, and control in a very negatively oriented way, where it's very just sort of, oh, well, the strongest survive and conquer kind of idea. So anyway, Ra says, I am Ra. This is correct. Through telepathy, the philosophy of the law of one with the distortion of service to self is promulgated. They telepathically, consciously promote this idea of power and dominance over others. In advanced groups, there are rituals and exercises given, and these have been written down, just as the service to other oriented entities have written down and promulgated philosophy of their teachers. The philosophy concerns the service of manipulating others, that they may experience service towards the other self, thus through this experience becoming able to appreciate service to self. These entities thus would become oriented towards service to self and in turn manipulate yet others so that they might in turn might experience the service towards the other self. Okay. So do you see what's happening right here is Ra is describing the process of converting the consciousness of Earth towards their orientation, getting them on the same consciousness field as them. They're having people promulgate this idea of service to self, and this is the manipulation of others. And it says, so the philosophy concerns manipulating others so that they might experience service towards the other self, thus through this experience becoming able to appreciate service to self. So essentially understanding, why it's beneficial to have service to self, like feeling that, the power and everything that comes with it. And then so they're going to go out and spread this idea as well and manipulate others, and then others are going to spread it, and it just this feedback loop of spreading. It's just spreading a certain type of philosophy, essentially. They spread the philosophy, they practice the philosophy, and realize, this philosophy gives me power, so I'm going to spread it, etc. So do you see the big difference here? It's not like aliens are coming down to, have us all at gunpoint with laser guns. According to Law of One, it's about psychologically manipulating the planet to get people on their wavelength so they can be controlled. Remember, they don't want just like a physical controlling of people. They want a mental controlling of people. They want people to join them by their own free will, basically, by going, oh yes, your philosophy matches my philosophy. Your consciousness matches my consciousness. Yes, let's be a part of this group. They essentially want to sublate or absorb human consciousness into their group consciousness. Now, remember, we don't know if this is true, but I think it's a much higher way of looking at things. Because if you really think about advanced alien species, this would be a lot closer to something that they would be interested in when we're talking about interdimensional beings than physically conquering. So, the questioner says, would this be the origin of what we call black magic? All right, so now we're talking about magic. If this was not confusing enough for newcomers, now we're throwing magic into the alien mix. Okay. So, if you're unfamiliar with magic, what magic really is, when you understand it as it's meant to be, it has nothing to do with what you see in TV or what 90% of the people out there who claim to be magic practitioners actually do. It has nothing to do with, summoning demons so that you'll get a raise at work, or casting love spells or whatever. You can do those things, but what magic essentially is about understanding how reality works and manipulating it towards a certain goal. So that does not mean conjuring a spirit or something like that. It means, for example, Aleister Crowley gave this example. Aleister Crowley said, look, when I take a pen and write in a book, that's my magical weapon. The pen is my magical weapon. And when I take that book and go to a publisher, the printing house, the distributor, those are all the spirits doing my will. And so Aleister Crowley basically said, look, my will is to spread, Aleister Crowley's religion is called Thelema. So Aleister Crowley said, my goal, my will, is to spread the message of Thelema. How do I do that? I take my magical weapon and create a magical spell, which is his book. And I take that book to my spirits, his publisher, and they distribute it to the world, thus accomplishing my will. So do you see, magic isn't anything, when it's understood fundamentally, is simply about understanding how existence works and manipulating existence so that a certain result that you want occurs. So hopefully that makes sense. I just want to put it out there. What magic really is just about, it's advanced psychology, it's understanding the principles of existence, and it's using them to have a desired result occur. So the act of writing a book, giving it to a publisher, and distributing it to people is an act of magic. You see, it's not anything crazy about that. It's simply the perspective and the understanding. As the magus, understanding my will is to do X, Y, and Z, and I will accomplish X, Y, and Z by doing, A, B, and C. And I will have this occur according to my will. So I just want to throw that out there. Quick crash course in magic. Now, of course, most people don't know this, by the way. If you talk to the average occultist or average magician or average, person interested in this thing, they usually don't know this. They take the symbolism as being actual, real, and literal. So anyway, Ross, or the questioner says, is this the origin of what we call black magic? Ross says, this is correct in one sense and incorrect in another. So by the way, what is black magic? Okay, so for one thing, people argue about the definition of black magic and white magic. But in general, the definition of black magic is if you enact your will and have a result that benefits yourself at the expense of the collective. So if you do an act of magic that benefits you but hurts the collective, that's considered black magic. White magic is doing an act of will where the result helps the collective, aids the collective. Now, you can do an act of white magic that is still beneficial to you, and it could still be white magic as long as it's not at the expense of the collective. You see, there's a difference. If you do, let's say, some white magic to put you in a state of mind where you are more psychologically inclined to, let's say, get a raise at work or be happy in your relationship or something like that, that's not at the expense of the collective. So that's totally fine. And it may even help the collective, because if you increase your capability, if you increase yourself, if you increase your own actualization, that will help the collective, because you are part of the collective. You're not separate from the collective. You're part of the collective. So helping yourself helps the collective if it's done in the right way. Black magic is when you benefit yourself at the expense of the collective. You kill someone and take their property. That's very much at the expense of the collective. So that would be black magic. So that's the general difference. So the questioner says, is this the origin of what we call black magic? Ra says, this is correct in one way, but incorrect in another way. The Orion group has aided the so-called negatively oriented among your mind-body-spirit complexes. By the way, Ra says mind-body-spirit complexes instead of people. These same entities would be concerning themselves with service to self in any case, and there are many upon your so-called inner planes which are negatively oriented, and thus available as teachers or guides, and so-called possessors of certain souls who seek this distortion of service to self. Okay, so Ra is saying that the Orion group has aided those who are negatively oriented among you. So people who are on the same wavelength as the Orion group has aided. These same entities would be concerning themselves with service to self in any case. So basically saying that there are people who are negatively oriented in their consciousness, so like would practice black magic. So basically, Ra is saying there are some people who do this without, they don't need the Orion group. They just do it naturally. They just are naturally oriented to their consciousness is already compatible with the Orion groups, so they don't need contact with the Orion group. They're already obsessed with service to self. So there are those who are just already like that. And there are many upon your inner planes which are negatively oriented, and thus available as inner teachers or guides, and so-called possessors of certain souls who seek the distortion of service to self. So also saying that, and necessarily, it's not necessarily that they would even need to contact the Orion group. They could contact other souls that were once human that could help aid in that philosophy as well. So they could contact minds or beings that not necessarily aren't part of the Orion group, but are still negatively oriented. So what Ra is basically saying is that, like, yes, this is black magic, but it doesn't necessarily all come from Orion. Black magic comes from a variety of different places. It just develops by itself. So the questioner says, is it possible for an entity here on Earth to be so confused as to call both the Confederation and the Orion group in an alternating way, one then the other? So Ra has said that people can call these different beings. People can call positive entities from the Confederation, or they can call negative entities from Orion. And Don, or the questioner, is saying, is it possible for someone on Earth to be confused so that sometimes they call the Confederation and other times they call the Orion group? Like, are they so confused that sometimes they're calling positive entities and sometimes they're calling negative entities? I am Ra. It is entirely possible for the untuned channel, as you call that service, to receive both positive and negative communications. If the entity at the base of its confusion is oriented towards service to others, the entity will begin to receive messages of doom. If the entity at the base of the complex of beingness is oriented towards service to self, the crusaders, who in this case do not find it necessary to lie, will simply begin to give the philosophy they are here to give. Many of your so-called contacts among your people have been confused and self-destruct because the channels were oriented towards service to others, but in the desire for proof, were open to the lying information of crusaders who then were able to neutralize the effectiveness of the channel. This is really interesting. Very, very interesting. Okay, so let's take a look at this. I find this sort of thing very, very fascinating. So Ra is saying it's possible for the untuned channel, so someone who's making calls to entities or just not but not really doing it in a very clear way. They're confused. It's a possible for an untuned channel, a person, to receive both positive and negative communications. If the entity, the person at the base of its confusion is oriented towards service to others, the entity will begin to receive messages of doom. So basically, if you have a human being that is of a positive mindset, but tunes in, channels a negative entity, they're going to receive messages of doom. If the entity at the base of the complex of beingness is oriented towards service to self, the crusader, who in this case do not find it necessary to lie, will simply begin to give the philosophy they are here to give. So basically, if a person is tuned towards service to self but contacts a negative entity, that negative entity will lie and give them messages of doom. If that person, however, isn't oriented towards service to self, or service to others, did I say that right? I might have gotten that. I might have misspoke. One more time, just in case. If a person is positively oriented and they accidentally call in a negative entity, that negative entity will lie and give messages of doom. However, if the person isn't positively oriented, if the person is negatively oriented and they call in a negative entity, then the negative entity won't lie and will just straight up give the philosophy that they are meant to give, because they're on the same consciousness level, the same wavelength. They're tuned the same. Many of your so-called contacts among your people have been confused and self-destructive because the channels were oriented towards service to others, but in the desire for proof, were open to the lying information of the Crusaders, who then were able to neutralize the effectiveness of the channel. So basically saying many people on Earth who have been positive have become confused and self-destructive because even though they were positive in their desire for proof, they were open to the lying information of the negative entities. So there's a lot of information in these books. They talk later about what this lying information is. And later on, it seems like negative entities actually start trying to interfere with the transmissions here. It's very, very interesting. We'll probably get to that at some point. We don't have time to get to that now, but it's very, very interesting. I think that Ra says something along the lines of, and you know, don't quote me on this because it's been very, very long. There's certain information that they say that negative entities give, like wrong dates, or they give information that's not factual, like wrong dates or really wild and crazy ideas or things like that, to discredit the idea that any of this is real. I'm pretty sure that was something that was said, that basically like they'll say things to try and discredit the information so that people will go, what? That doesn't make sense. That is interfering with the channel by providing false information to make it seem like it's false and not real. Again, don't quote me on that. It's been a while since I've read these books, but I'm pretty sure that was part of it. So the questioner says, are most of these crusaders fourth density? Ra says, I am Ra. There is a majority of fourth density. That is correct. Fourth density is a consciousness level. Fourth density would be sort of like one level up from where humans are right now, self-aware. Essentially, in terms of law of one lingo, we're trying to get humanity to reach fourth density, which is awareness of the interconnectedness of all things. But you can reach a higher level of consciousness than that, which is the formation of group consciousness, then actually being able to have a group consciousness, because you need multiple individuals to form that consciousness, and then another level beyond that where that group consciousness becomes so synchronized it doesn't even rely on the physical world anymore. So you have these different levels. They're saying the majority of these negative entities are fourth density. Don says, are there any and Ra claims to be sixth density. The questioner says, are there any Confederation or Orion individuals living on Earth visible to us and important in our society at this time, walking among us? Okay, now this is really interesting here. Don is the questioner. I keep saying Don, so I'm just gonna say Don. The questioner's name is Don. He's a professor of physics and engineering and part of the LL research team. His name is Don. I'm just gonna call him Don because I'm sick of correcting myself. Don says, are there any Confederation or Orion individuals living on Earth that are visible to us and important to our society at this time, walking among us? Ra replies, I am Ra. There are no entities of either group walking among you at this time. However, the Crusaders of Orion use two types of entities to do their bidding, shall we say. The first type is a thought form. The second a kind of robot. Now, this is weird. This is weird. Okay, let's break this down. A couple interesting things here. First of all, he says that there aren't any entities of either group walking among you. And I think that that sounds pretty legit, because it wouldn't really make sense. We're talking more in the realm of interdimensional entities here. So having them walk among us like how it's depicted in movies and stuff, that's a little more sci-fi. So that sounds like decent information. And then for him to say that they use a thought form to do their bidding, that's also like, okay, that makes a lot of sense with regard to an interdimensional being trying to interact with the world. They would be using thought forms. But then they say the second, a kind of robot. And that's a little weird. Things like this are make me go, I don't know. Because that's odd. So yeah, it's kind of a weird thing to say. Let's see what is said about this. Don says, could you describe the robot? Ra says, I am Ra. The robot may look like any other being. It is a construct. So a couple different things here. Remember, we don't know if this is real. We don't know if it's made up. We don't know if it's part of Carla's unconscious. If it's part of Carla's unconscious, something's coming up. We don't know what it is. Whatever. If it's made up, like, yeah, this sounds weird. This sounds like something that would be made up. Like, oh yeah, robots. That sounds like a made up thing. If it is real, I would think that Ra would not perhaps be using the right word, or would be describing something different and not and using the incorrect word, or not coming across the way that they mean it to come across. So which one of those it is, I leave it up to you to decide. I don't know. But so Ra says the robot may look like any other being. It is a construct. And Don says, is the robot what is normally called men in black? Ra says, I am Ra. This is incorrect. Don says, who are the men in black? Ra says, I am Ra. The men in black are a thought form type of entity, which have some beingness to their makeup. They have certain physical characteristics given them. However, their true vibrational nature is without third density vibrational characteristics, and therefore they are able to materialize and dematerialize when necessary. So Ra is saying that there are beings that Dawn refers to as men in black that are a thought form that can materialize and dematerialize because they aren't of physical material. So a couple things. Interesting. Makes sense with regard to interdimensional beings and the materialization of thought forms. Makes sense. Calling them men in black is kind of weird, but that's what Dawn is calling them. Ra didn't call them that. That's what Dawn is calling them. So also, okay, interesting. Don says, are all these men in black then used by the Orion Crusaders? Ra says, I am Ra. This is correct. Don says, if one were to visit me, I like this question. Don says, if one were to visit me and I grabbed him and locked him in a closet, could I keep him or would he disappear? What are you trying to do, Don? Don wants a pet thought form. Don wants a servitor. Ra says, I am Ra. It depends. I don't know. This question just makes me laugh. I am Ra. It depends upon which type of entity you grab. You are perhaps able to perceive a construct. The construct might be kept for a brief period, although these constructs have an ability to disappear. The programming on these constructs, however, makes it more difficult to remotely control them. You would not be able to grapple with a thought form entity of the men in black, as you call it, type. So interesting. Again, the word Men in Black is weird, but even Ra is like, that's what you're calling it, not me. And Don is basically saying, or Ra is saying that they have the ability to materialize and disappear, and that they're remotely controlled. And that's what's interesting, you know, when again, that's interesting. It sounds, that type of thing sounds plausible, right? When you're dealing with interdimensional entities, things like thought-controlled materializations sound plausible. Robots, not so much, but I don't know if Ra ever mentions those again. We'll see. But Ra was not really clear on what those even were, but that is strange. I also just find it weird that Ra uses the term robot when Ra doesn't even refer to people as people. Ra refers to them as mind, body, spirit complexes. You think Ra would have referred to robot as something like the technological electric complex or something, you know? It's a little weird. Diana says, I think he means avatar. Yeah, what did... No, because I think Ra would have just called it a social... Or Ra would have called it a mind-body-spirit complex. When Don says, could you describe the robot? Ra says, the robot may look like any other being. It is a construct. This info just sounds really off from all the other stuff that Ra says. It's odd. It strikes me as, and that's another thing too. It's like, well, you know, if this is real, could that be a negative entity interfering with the channel and trying to throw in some weird information to make it seem not credible? So you never know. You know, like I told you, I am transparent with you guys. We don't know the validity of this information. Could all be made up. We have to be skeptical. But there's a lot of good stuff to talk about in here. And I know I say this so much, but the reason why I say it so much is because this is a big pitfall a lot of people get into, is that they just believe information and they'll get wrapped up in the story and start becoming diluted. And I just want to keep reminding, because information like this can really trip people up, because they can start taking it literally and not being skeptical about it, and then that can lead to dangerous outcomes. So I know I say it a lot, but it's for an important reason to remember to always stay critical with info like this. Because remember, I just did a video on the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, and if you haven't seen it, go watch it, where I show, look, these are a hoax, but look at all the people who believe in the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. But they're a hoax. They were created by this, there was this guy named Doriel who claimed to have who found these tablets that could communicate with his mind and made of an indestructible material in Atlantean language. Oh, but he never showed them to anybody, and he made all these crazy predictions. His wife even called him a fraud. There's just no evidence for it whatsoever. And so the idea of, and then you have like Joseph Smith of Mormonism, who found the golden plates from the angel Moroni, but then he didn't have the plates. He couldn't show them to anyone because, he gave them back to the angel. So we always have to be skeptical with information that's coming from other beings. But there's a lot of really good information in the Law of One material. I like it a lot, regardless. And that's the thing. Regardless, there are interesting ideas to think about as long as we stay critical and skeptical. That's important, but we want to be open-minded. You see, it's about both. So anyway, if you haven't seen my video on the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, by the way, go check it out, because there are real emerald tablets, and that's the Emerald Tablets of Hermes Trismegistus. Well, we don't know if it was actually an emerald tablet, but and it probably wasn't written by Hermes, but it's an actual document that has very interesting information in it. Flower Dragon, thank you for the super chat, says it sounds like robot might mean artificial intelligence and thought forms could materialize and dematerialize holographically. Also, thank you for stimulating my mind. Yeah. Oh, you're very welcome. So thought forms could materialize and dematerialize holographically. It's possible. It's possible that thought forms could materialize and dematerialize holographically. From what we know about reality in our system, in the Neogenian system of meta-rationalism, that we know reality is based on frequency information and that reality is a projection of frequency information, it is possible that thought forms could be projected just like anything else is projected. Now, that would seem extremely complicated. So could it, in theory, yes. In practice, maybe. We would have to see. It's open. It is possible within the theoretical framework. Do we know for sure that it could practically occur? No. We need to investigate that. And as far as Ra meaning AI for robot, I don't know. I don't think that's what it means, because it says the robot may look like any other being. It is a construct. And we haven't talked about, I don't know. I don't think so. That's an interesting thing to bring up, though. I hadn't thought about it possibly being AI. But remember, these were channeled in the 80s. So they certainly didn't have AI then. So I don't know. It's a little weird, though. So anyway. Ra just got done describing the idea that there are these thought form things that are remotely controlled that can materialize and dematerialize. And Don says, this is a profound revelation. I believe in the law of free will. Thank you. Don continues, this is a minor question further to make an example of this principle. Oh, okay. Important. If the Confederation landed on Earth, they would be taken as gods, breaking the law of free will, and thus reducing their polarization towards service to all. So if positive entities came and landed on Earth, they would be taken like gods and they would be worshipped, and this would reduce what they're trying to do, which is aid in humanity's conscious evolution, etc. Don continues, I assumed that the same thing would happen if the Orion group landed. How would this affect their polarization towards service to self if they were able to land and become known as gods? Ra replies, I am Ra. In the event of a mass landing of the Orion group, the effect of polarization would be strongly towards an increase of service to self, precisely the opposite of the former opportunity which you mentioned. So Don says, if the Orion group were able to land, would this increase their polarization? In other words, basically Don's saying, if the Orion group were to land, would this be helpful to them? And Don continues, what I'm trying to get at is it better for them to work behind the scenes and get recruits, shall we say, from our planet? The person on our planet going towards service to self strictly on his own using his own free will? Or is it just as good for the Orion group to land upon our planet and demonstrate remarkable powers and get people like that? So very, very interesting. Don is saying, okay, what's better for the Orion group? To work behind the scenes and get and recruit people so that people by their own free will follow the Orion philosophy and go on the Orion wavelength and have that kind of consciousness? Or would it be better for the Orion group to just land and come out in the open and demonstrate how powerful they are and get people that way? Ra says, I am Ra. The first instance, that is working behind the scenes and getting people to join freely, that in the long run is more salubrious for the Orion group which is a fancy word for healthy, for the Orion group, in that it does not infringe upon the law of one by landing, and thus does its work through those of this planet. In the second circumstance, that is with them just coming out in the open, a mass landing would create a loss of polarization due to the infringement upon the free will of the planet. However, it would be a gamble. If the planet then were conquered and became part of the empire, the free will would then be reestablished. This is restrained in action due to the desire of the Orion group to progress towards the one creator. This desire to progress inhibits the group from breaking the law of confusion. And the law of confusion is basically the law of free will, just stated in another way. So basically what Ra is saying is, what Ra is saying is that in the long run, it's better for the Orion group to work behind the scenes and get people to convert to freely by their own free will to the Orion consciousness, essentially. They're saying that if they were to just land and conquer that way, this would infringe on people's free will. And so they would lose those people that they could have converted. So you can kind of imagine it this way. Imagine this way. If you're working behind the scenes and you, throughout the years of working behind the scenes, you get an entire planet to just adopt your philosophy, you've got them all on your wavelength. They're all yours now. However, if you don't do that and you just, plop down right in the open, you're going to get like some people who want to join you, others who are screaming and running away. You can try and like force people, but if you're forcing them, they're not on your wavelength. Remember, they want people on their wavelength. Like they literally want people to adopt their philosophy and their consciousness. And so if they're just like it's just very chaotic. It's very primitive. This is a psychological game. They're trying to get people to alter their frequency towards their polarization. They're not just trying to have a mass landing and cause a bunch of chaos and confusion. However, Ra is saying, if the planet were then conquered and became part of the empire, the free will would then be reestablished. Now, what I think Ra may mean by that is something along the lines of, well, let's say the planet were conquered, and then maybe through generational brainwashing, perhaps, maybe something along those lines. I'm not entirely sure, but essentially that they could get the free will reestablished by another means. But long story short, Ra is saying it's a lot more advantageous to work behind the scenes and convert a planet to a particular wavelength via free will rather than trying to come down and force everyone. It's not really the way to do it. And I like this question. This question says, you mentioned the word empire in relation to the Orion group. I have thought for some time that the movie Star Wars was somehow an allegory, in part, for what is actually happening. Is this correct? And I just really like that Dawn is asking this interdimensional sixth density being, claims to be Ra, who contacted the Egyptians and built the pyramids and all like what he thinks about Star Wars. I don't know. I just think that's kind of funny. Ra says, I am Ra. This is correct in the same way that a simple children's story is an allegory for physical, philosophical, social, complex, distortion understanding. This is correct in the same way that a simple children's story is an allegory for physical, philosophical, social, complex, distortion understanding. See, and then Ra says robot. Like, you know what I mean? It's just weird that Ra's just like, hey, yeah, also, instead of just saying like, oh, a children's story, physical, philosophical, social, complex, distortion understanding, but Ra is also like, oh yeah, by the way, there's robots. Like, it's weird. That's one of the things that rings very weird to me. But anyway, Ra is saying like, yeah, it's kind of like Star Wars, and like how a children's story kind of mirrors certain things that goes on in the world. It's like a kid's story. Basically, Star Wars is like a kid's story version of what's going on, kind of. Now, really interesting, because now we get into the idea of religion. So the questioner says, well, the Confederation established its quarantine, I understand, 75,000 years ago. Has the Orion group been attempting to contact any part of this planet prior to that? How long have they been trying to contact the planet? So basically, Ra is saying, they're done saying like, hey, has the Orion group ever tried to contact the planet? Now remember, Ra is a 6th density social memory complex, or a group mind. And this is super interesting because Ra says that 3,600 years ago, in Orion social memory complex contacted Earth. And Don asks Ra what the name is of this social memory complex from Orion that contacted Earth was. What was its name? And Ra replies, Yahweh, which is, of course, if you don't know, the name of the God of the Bible, of Christianity. Yahweh. And very interesting. So what we're going to get into next time is this idea of alien group mind, is an alien group mind. Essentially what Ra is saying is that the God of the Bible is an alien group mind. That is an Orion entity. Essentially, the God of Christianity is an Orion entity. So very, very interesting. And this is going to really play into, Ra starts talking about like the 10 Commandments and Moses contacting this being Yahweh from the Orion group. Very, very interesting stuff, because now we're getting into the idea of religion, and that particular religion being an offshoot of, or like part of, the Orion philosophy, trying to polarize Earth towards the Orion configuration. Really interesting stuff, and that's what really, part of that really intrigues me. So that's what we're going to talk about next time. So make sure that you are there. We're going to talk about this on Monday. So on Monday, we will be discussing how, according to the law of one, the God of the Bible, the God of Christianity, is this group mind from the Orion Empire that contacted humanity and established the system for controlling the minds of the masses. Interesting stuff. So that's what we're talking about next time. My friends, as always, remember, stay skeptical, but also stay open-minded. Interesting things to think about. Don't go anywhere, though, because in the poll, I'm going to poll you guys to see what you think about this information. So I want you to take part in the poll. And remember, if you enjoy my work, consider supporting on Patreon. It helps out a lot. And you get access to members-only videos every single week. Every week we have a new members-only video. And you can support on any level on Patreon, or tier 2 or higher on YouTube for that. You can also check out my Spotify channel. I have Spotify channel. It's called The New Beginning. And remember, if you're interested in my work and what we're doing here, our system is known as the Neogenian, which is the new beginning. Take a look at that. And as always, remember as well, never feel pressured to support monetarily. I never want anyone to feel pressured to support monetarily. There are plenty of free ways you can support, like liking, sharing, and subscribing. And I want to give a big shout out, though, to those who do support, especially Renaissance Fairy, Cassidy, Angela, DB, Enki, Nusalina, Merlin, Paul Rogers III, and everyone else. Thank you very much. All right, but I'm not going anywhere. I am going to jump to the comments, and I'm going to poll you guys. First of all, if you have any questions, ask away. Now's the time to ask. But I'm also going to poll you guys. And real quick, thank you to Embers Omega and Archangel. Thank you both for the super chats. I appreciate that very, very much. And thank you to Edgar Allan Wick and John Philip Brooks and Scott Romano and Graham Seth Brown and Jane. Thank you all for the stars. Sorry, I had to, I have no comforter. I had to throw my comforter away last night because my laundry machine broke and it was just soaking wet. Anyway, long story short, I have a comforter and it's very cold at night. So I need that. But yeah, let me think. I'm going to do a poll, but I was so tempted to keep, because the next part is so interesting about this, group mind from the Orion Empire called Yahweh that talks to Moses and starts establishing what would eventually become what we know as Christianity. So I was really tempted to keep going, but we're going to save that for next week. Fascinating though, isn't it? Fascinating. You guys better be here for next week, because it's going to be good. Going to be good stuff. Getting really into psychological warfare and religion. And see, that's what I think is interesting. When you start thinking about what weapons are really powerful, not lasers or religion. Religion is the powerful weapon. You see, that's where you have to start really thinking in terms of psychological warfare and getting beings to adopt your consciousness and your philosophy. Yeah, it should be about the same. So I'm going to ask, okay, let's see. I'm going to do two polls. The first poll, I'm going to ask you guys if you think that the UFOs and UAPs that have been seen lately, like the ones that have been reported, I'm going to ask you if you think that they are hostile or not. And when I say hostile, I don't necessarily mean that they're going to land and start shooting people with lasers, but I mean hostile in the sense that they have a nefarious intent for humanity in one way or another. And then the question I'm going to ask you guys after that is about the law of one material itself. All the stuff that we just read is, do you think it's real? Do you think it's made up? Or do you think if it's a part of Carla's unconscious mind, the channeler's unconscious mind? And I'm interested to see, because today we talked about some of the stuff that gives me a little bit of pause, like the robot thing is a little weird. But anyway, I'm interested to see. Michael, thank you for being a member for 16 months. Says, next time this one end to a poll? Tie. Next time, tie one end to a pole, then stretch it out and twist it as tight as you can, then throw it in the dryer. I know, it was just a pain in the ass because I live in an apartment complex and all the other dryers were full, and I would just have had to have this slopping wet thing in my apartment for, it was just, and it was old. I needed a new comforter anyways. It was kind of old. So I just thought, screw it. I need a new comforter anyways. This is way too much trouble than it's worth. Good Guy Activism says they aren't hostile because they would have attacked. But this whole stream was about how attacking wouldn't be helpful for them. Okay. Max says, I think it's Ra versus Yahweh. Isn't this, see, okay. I really find the Law of One fascinating because, yeah, it's like Ra versus Yahweh, which is really fucking cool. It's like, even if it's all made up, it's really interesting. And a lot of it rings very, very true. So that's why, you know, if it's not real, I'd be leaning towards a manifestation of Carla's unconscious because it matches so much with a lot of things about how we know how reality operates. It's Law of One is a very interesting set of material, I will say, no matter what the outcome is. Elise, thank you for the super chat. Says, very interesting. Do you think the channeling of different mind complexes led to the discrepancies we see in some of the different biblical texts? What biblical, do I think that the channeling of different mind complexes lead to the discrepancies we see in some of the different biblical, what discrepancies do you mean, like the discrepancy between the Old Testament and the New Testament, or what do you mean exactly by discrepancy? So let's do a poll. Esoteric Luna says, the Yahweh thing makes so much sense. I've often thought the Old Testament God sounded more like an evil alien overlord, so I'm willing to believe Ra. It's you know, it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, it does. It's believable. It's believable. Let me get this poll started here. Start a poll. Okay. Do you believe the... Okay, how about this? Are the UFO... So are the UFOs hostile? And remember, when I say hostile, I don't necessarily mean conquering with laser guns. Just have negative intentions for humanity. So I'm going to do that poll. Just real quick. And then after this poll, I'm going to see what you think about the Law of One material. What are we at so far? So far we only have 150 votes, but there are over 700 people in here, so we'll wait for more votes. But so far, 30% think they're hostile, 40% think that they are not hostile, and 30% say that they don't know. But we'll wait because these numbers are kind of fluctuating a lot. So let me take a look at some of these comments. So Good Guy Activism says they are more concerned with the planet's well-being and our growth as a species. They have advanced way beyond war. They want to assist us in our growth as a species. Did you watch the video? Because yeah, like essentially what the video is saying is that there are two types of entities. One types of entities that want to do everything exactly like you said. They want our growth as a species. But then another type of entity that wants to convert our consciousness towards their polarity so that we become a part of their empire, essentially. Yeah, Drink Juice says yeah, that's a good point. So Drink Juice says any bad entity of higher level consciousness wants our growth, but in their way. Yeah, you know what? That's actually a really good point. That's actually a really good point. Great way to put it, Drink Juice. I think you've articulated what I've been trying to say. That's really, really, yes. Okay. So Drink Juice's point is that from the perspective of negative entities, they're also trying to help humanity, but they're doing what they believe is the way to help humanity. And yeah, that's a really good point, because no one ever really thinks that they're the bad guy. So from the perspective of the Orion Empire, I'm picturing that meme between Obi-Wan and Anakin when they're fighting, and they're on Mustafar. God, I am a Star Wars nerd, aren't I? And they're on the lava river, and Obi-Wan says something like, "The Sith are evil," and Anakin's like, "It's from my perspective, the Jedi are evil," or something like that. From my point of view, the Jedi are evil. So yeah, from Orion's point of view, they would be helping humanity. And they believe that helping humanity is by getting humanity to evolve to their level of consciousness. Lucid Moments of Reality says, "I'll join the Empire. This world is sucking." You know what's really surreal? Like the fact that we're even having this conversation, and it's kind of funny, right? How you're kind of like joking, saying, oh, like I joined the Empire. This world sucks. But it's really funny because, you know, like the fact that we're even having streams about this, and in Congress they had the whole UFO hearing. It's very weird to hear this being discussed in like normal discourse. So it's just really, I don't know what I'm trying to get across. It's funny to me that if let's say, for example, let's say that the law of one is real. And let's say that these UFOs are Orion craft, right? Let's say that's the case. And let's say that, I don't know, this gets revealed to the public. The president comes out and goes, "You know what? Yes, we've had contact with UFOs, UAPs. They're the Orion group. They're trying to get humanity to join their empire. But there's also the Confederation, and they're trying to keep Earth protected, and blah, 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 blah." I don't know. I just find it amusing that if that happened, we would be having live streams about it, and there would be people in the chat being like, "Oh yeah, I totally want to join the empire, and then other people being like, no. I don't know. It's just, I don't know. I'm not getting across my point very well. It's amusing to see this discussed casually, I guess. It's weird. Tara Pink says, I love this channel. Thank you. I'm glad you do. Adrian says hostile, meaning we're all getting probed like Cartman in South Park. I don't think I've seen that. Okay, so let's see. So far, okay, how many people are in here? We have almost 800 people in here. By the way, if you haven't hit like, please do. Please close out the live chat for just a minute. Hit the like button, then bring the live chat back up so we can spread this info around. I think this is important stuff. Regardless if what we're talking about today is real or not, it's important for people to get thinking. That's where I like the law of one. Because look, regardless if it's real in the particulars, there are human beings that want humanity to be oriented in that negative polarity. And there are, I'm sure, higher beings and interdimensional beings that also want that. Whether they're called Orion and they're related to the particular craft we've been seeing, who knows? But the basic pattern is pretty on point. And it's worth getting people thinking about these ideas. So anyway, please vote in the poll too, so we can see what you guys think. So we have roughly 300 votes are in. So far, 30% think that they're hostile. 40% think that they are not hostile. And 30% don't know. I kind of wish that I didn't put don't know so that you would have to be forced to choose. Spectral Deviant says, you were the show. You were supposed to destroy the Sith, not join them. I really am a Star Wars nerd. I denied it. I think a few streams ago, I said, I'm not really that into Star Wars. I guess I am. I don't know how it happened. It just sort of, I don't know. But I guess so. Esoteric Luna says, Darth Morgue, LOL. Well, look, I will say, like, the Dark Jedi have a much better sense of fashion. The Jedi do not have good fashion sense. The Dark Jedi have great fashion sense. I'm about to nerd out here and show my Star Wars nerdiness, but so like you have the Dark Jedi and you have the Light Jedi, or the Sith and the Jedi. Sith technically aren't the same thing as the Dark Jedi. Sith is like a whole philosophy and religion of dark side users. But anyway, it's interesting when you think about it, because the Jedi are the good guys, right? But they're all about basically like being unemotional, kind of like not having emotion. Whereas the Dark Jedi or the Sith are all about like tapping into your emotion, like you know, feel the hatred running through you, you know, and it's you know, it's interesting because they're both like the Sith are wrong in that they go around trying to conquer and destroy everyone, and their emotions are just way out of control with their hatred and anger and destruction. But the Jedi kind of suck as well, in that you're not allowed to have emotion. Not really. You're not allowed to have like emotion or attachments or any of that kind of stuff. So anyway, the gray Jedi are where it's at. The synthesis. I almost did Palpatine. Do it. All right, enough Star Wars. No more Star Wars. Yeah, yay. Yeah, Mark says, oh, hell, there are even gray Jedi who believe in balancing both sides of the Force within themselves rather than privileging the light side. That mythos rolls and rolls. I don't know what you mean by rolls and rolls, but yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. They synthesize both sides of the Force, which is what I think is super cool. Why haven't we had a Star Wars show or movie or something yet with gray Jedi? Gray Jedi are super cool. Yes, Jar Jar was definitely a Sith. DeFunko says, but Obi-Wan loved Anakin. That's emotion, LOL. Yeah, because Star Wars is pretty sloppy with its storytelling. Like Yoda saying, or no, who says that? No, it's Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan says only Sith deal in absolutes. Well, that statement is an absolute. Don't make me get all philosophical here. You can't just say that only Sith deal in absolute because that's an absolute statement. Lucid Moments of Reality says this is the greatest stream. I'm glad you're enjoying it. So let's see, we have about 320 votes in. So far, 30% think they're hostile. Around 40% think they're not hostile, and 35% don't know. If you haven't voted yet, please do, and please hit the like button. Esoteric Luna says, just out of curiosity, Morgue, do you think humans will be able to terraform Mars or even live there one day? Maybe that's the thing, but maybe. But the whole thing is that what kind of frustrates me about this whole idea about terraforming Mars is like, hey, here's an idea. Why don't we make this planet better? Like, we don't need to fuck up another planet. It's just going to be shitty, like this one. It's like, oh, let's go terraform Mars. We have terraform at home. We need to make this planet better. Is it possible? Yeah, it's probably possible. And at some point, would it be nice to have a backup planet? Yeah, maybe. If some asteroid is barreling down on us, it might be good to have a backup planet. But ultimately, and I'll tell you what, this idea, this is most likely what's going to be the problem. Okay, so there's three phases of evolution. There's the survival phase, the phase of planetary civilization, and then holos independence. Survival phase is just getting an avatar that's capable of self-awareness and hyper-awareness. We did that. Yay, survival phase complete. Except humanity hasn't realized that survival phase is complete, so they're still stuck in survival mode and hating each other and killing each other and whatever. We're trying to move now to planetary civilization, which is when hyper-awareness kicks in, humanity reaches hyper-awareness, and we create a global, united, teleocratic planetary civilization. That's what we want to do. That's our goal as the Neogenian, and as Neogenians, this is our goal. Now, the third phase is holos independence. Now, the third phase of holos independence is when we form this group network mind and establish our own CFD or collective frequency domain, which is our own dimension, our own universe. And we won't even be associated with this planet anymore. We'll be gone. As Zedic minds, as Zetas, we'll have evolved as a network of minds and create our own dimension. No longer even associated with the holos of this planet. But there will be a problem. Okay, so right now, what are the problems that we face? We face certain global cataclysms preventing us from reaching the second phase. Some of those global, one of the biggest ones are nuclear. Oh, which was really interesting about the UFOs being interested in the ICBM station. Anyway, I digress. Some of the things preventing us from evolving is nuclear war, global pandemics, global warming, anything that requires global cooperation to overcome. Because when it's like, okay, either you have to evolve as a group or you're going to die. Either you have to evolve as a collective to overcome nuclear war or you're going to nuke yourselves. So nuclear war, global pandemics, global warming, things like this force us to work as a collective or have the collapse of modern civilization. So it's a cataclysm and it forces our evolution. Or we die. If we can successfully build a planetary civilization, which is what we are here to do. So you should help us do that, by the way. If you're new here, help us do that. And how do you do this? How do you help us? By spreading awareness, spreading consciousness, helping people understand these ideas, working on your own consciousness, elevating your own consciousness. Everything begins as an idea. Anyway, if we're able to do this and establish a planetary civilization, the next stage will be Holos independence. Well, what will be the thing that's sort of the cataclysm for Holos independence, preventing us or forcing us to make a decision one way or the other? Well, what it might be is something called asymptotic burnout. Do we know for sure it's this? No, but it might be something called asymptotic burnout. Asymptotic burnout is, and I did a whole live stream on it, so I'm just going to explain it real simply. It's a little complicated, but in a nutshell, it's that if we try to have galactic conquest by expanding into the cosmos, there will reach a point where our energy consumption is greater than our ability to produce energy, no matter how technologically advanced that we get. And so we will collapse. At that point, right, we've already worked together. The problem there will be to change our focus from galactic conquest to inner transformation or planetary homeostasis. Because if we do that, if we change from the outer to the inner, this is when we will start to develop the ability to tune, to access different collective frequency domains or CFDs, and develop our own CFD, our own collective frequency domain. So part of, the things like expanding to Mars, etc., that's going to be a real problem at some point where we're going to have minds that are like, oh, we need to expand into the cosmos and conquer. And where it's going to be like, no, we will burn out if we do that. We need to focus internally, develop the ability to tune, and establish our own collective frequency domain. See, the problem that we have today is that, hey, everyone, please stop killing each other. We want you to all realize that we're interconnected so that we can all have a beautiful world together, so that we can have healthcare and education and enough money to live and thrive and create beautiful experiences together and self-actualize and transcend and have a teleocratic community. That's where we're at right now, right? That is our issue. Hey, everyone, please stop killing each other. Realize we're all one. Realize we're all connected, and let's build a planet that reflects that. That's the issue we're facing right now. The next issue, the issue that we will face tomorrow, possibly is, hey, everyone, stop trying to go out and expand into the cosmos and have galactic conquest. Stop doing that. Instead, look inside so we can develop the ability to tune and establish our own dimension. So that's a future problem. That's a problem we'll have to face. But you can see the similarity here. We're transitioning from phase 1 to phase 2. Our problem is hey, everyone, please realize we're interconnected. Transitioning from phase 2, from phase 3 will be like, hey, everyone, please let's synchronize and look inwards rather than external conquest. Possibly. We don't know for sure, and we don't know for sure, but that's a possibility. Esoteric Luna says, do you think it's possible for higher beings to be using wormhole technology, such as in the form of stargates? That's a very good question. I think if they are, I think that it's something different than how we would imagine it to be. So, for example, like these objects that we're seeing, these UFOs or UAPs, what if they are actually some sort of like pseudo avatars for a Zedic mind? You know, Ra talks about them being remote controlled thought forms or something. Well, we have these avatars. Well, what if these UFOs or UAPs are really some sort of base avatar for a Zedic mind to control and interact in this domain? Now, David Grusch, though, claimed that actual biological bodies were found. He didn't see any of them, but he said that they're in the report. So that kind of is a question mark. But it's interesting to think about the possibility of, you know, having these things as having minds linked to them. So I kind of got a little off topic, but my point is, you know, this idea of like stargates or using wormholes might work differently than how we think that they work in sci-fi movies. Because in sci-fi movies, you know, it kind of adopts the materialist, physicalist paradigm of science today. Like, oh, we're just physical bodies and that's it. And so we're literally going to dematerialize this body and materialize this body somewhere else. Whereas when we get to that technological level, it may involve the soul more in some way. It may involve the eternal mind, the Zeta. It may involve the... I don't know at all. I'm purely speculating here. I'm just speculating that I suspect perhaps that it may work differently than how we see it depicted in film and television. It's an interesting thing to think about. It's for sure. But I have a suspicion it may be different. Esoteric Luna says, interesting thoughts for sure. Yeah, and I love what I like about this is these are interesting questions. The stuff that we're talking about today, this is what I like about this stuff. Because we're all about higher consciousness. How do you expand your consciousness? By going over the limits of your current consciousness, by going over the boundaries. And things that we're talking about today are really around the boundaries of our consciousness. There are things that we know, things that we don't know, things that we suspect, things that we speculate. And it's getting us to really exercise the mind and think about concepts that we don't normally think about. And that's why I really like things like the Law of One, regardless if it's real or not. It gets you thinking about interdimensional beings. It gets you thinking about, see, the Law of One is a great exercise in consciousness because first of all, it makes you use metacognition because you have to examine, is this real or is this not real? Your thought self-examining itself. So you're using metacognition. Then you're using concept networking if you're doing it properly. Because you're thinking about interdimensional beings, you're thinking about magic, you're thinking about religion, and how all this could connect and relate. Because most people would think these things have nothing to do with each other. What the hell does magic have to do with religion, have to do with interdimensional beings? Like, it sounds crazy to most people. But when you look and start to see how it connects, and you really understand these things, what they are, when you understand interdimensional beings aren't little green men in spaceships with laser guns, and when you understand that magic isn't about, you know, summoning demons from a pentagram, and you understand that religion is a form of a psychological reality tunnel that constricts and conditions consciousness, when you start seeing how all this stuff connects, this is how you start to form like big picture understandings of reality. So anyway, that's why I like, and I'm very careful with this kind of stuff. And that's why I mention it. That's why I mention so often that we don't know if it's true or not. The reason why I mention that so often is because books like this and material like this is really good as an exercise to exercise consciousness But because it's at that boundary as well, it's really easy to fall into a religious trap. Like, oh yeah, of course this is real. And I'm going to make a religion around this now. And I worship Ra. And oh my God, watch out for the Orion entities. Where are they? And watch out for the robots and the men in black. And oh, fuck. You don't want that to happen. But that can happen really easy. So that's why I stress so much is, hey, we don't know. But it's a good exercise if one does so cautiously and rationally and logically. Defunk says, it's behind you. Oh my God. The robot is behind me. Okay, so let's see. Okay, I think we're going to end this poll and then take another one. So the answer, so let's look at the results of this poll. So are the UFOs hostile? 39% say no. 26% say yes. 34% say they don't know. So it seems like most of you don't think that they're hostile. If they are hostile, they're very happy with this result. They're like, haha, yes, excellent. 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 Very interesting. So let's Andrew Power says humans exist in other galaxies. You guys realize that, right? Okay, question. How do you know that? How do you know? Let's do a poll. So, okay. Do you think so from what we read, I want to know if you think it's real or not. So the options are, it's real, it's made up, or manifestation of unconscious. And okay, so I want you to know, what do you think of the law of one? Is it real? Is it made up? Or a manifestation of the unconscious? And what I mean by the manifestation of the unconscious is, if you're new here, Carla is the channeler. So Carla is channeling this information. So when I say manifestation of the unconscious, it's, do you think that this information, rather than coming from an extraterrestrial interdimensional being, could it actually be coming from Carla's own unconscious mind? Because Carla, is very intelligent, knowing religious, having a religious studies background and all kinds of spirituality and stuff. So it could be that she's tapping into her own unconscious or the collective unconscious. So is it real? Is it made up? Or a manifestation of the unconscious? I'm curious. And by the way, Elise, I'm so sorry that I didn't answer your question, but I'm still unsure what you mean by discrepancies we see in the different biblical texts. I don't know which discrepancies you mean particularly. If you mean like Old Testament or New Testament or specific books. David Isaac, thank you so much for the super chat, David. Says, thank you for talking about the law of one. Ra may not be trustworthy, but I'm glad to see these topics discussed outside of love and light New Age circles. Yeah, and thank you, David. And yeah, I am of the same mindset. Ra might not, even if it's real, like let's say, that's another thing we even talk about. Even if it's real, we don't know if Ra is actually has good intentions or not. But anyway, yes, even if it is, yes, these topics discussed outside of love and light New Age circles, exactly. Having these topics discussed in a way that's critical and rational, where it's not just outright dismissed, but not that it's just taken as gospel truth either, I think is really important. And that's what we're all about here in the Neogenian, is that we want to create a new world where all these ideas are taken seriously. Like, for example, a higher consciousness. We talk about higher consciousness a lot. You go to most New Age circles or whatever, and you go, what's higher consciousness? They go, oh, it's like an abundance mindset. So what? And you'll get 100 different answers from 100 different people. We need to seriously examine this phenomenon of higher consciousness with rigorous psychology. And this is what we do. So higher consciousness is literally development of a new structure in the psyche known as the analog all, which is an internal model or representation of all of reality that one identifies with. So it's literally a construction of a new structure in the psyche, just like the ego was a structure in the psyche that develops for developed self-awareness. The analog all develops for hyper-awareness, all awareness, higher consciousness. And this is where we start examining things very, very intensely. And then so with the nature of reality as well, this is where our system of meta-rationalism comes in, where we say that we can understand metaphysics rationally, and we understand existence according to mathematics and the source formula and Fourier transforms, and seeing how energy interacts with each other in terms of Zedic minds, which are eternal beings of frequencies that through their interactions of frequency patterns can project space-time domains. And we can channel and tune into these different space-time domains by understanding the frequency composition of them and how to access these things. So in other words, we need to realize that we're on the cusp of a new era, and that's what we are, the new beginning. And we need to take all this very, very seriously and pull it out of the silly way that it's been interpreted in like love and light New Agey circles, where it's not given the scrutiny or rigor that is needed. And not to bash on that too much, I don't mean to, but it's just about time that we really take this seriously and start to work on a new world right now. And that's exactly what we're here to do. Philip, hi. Nice to see you. Shout out to Philip in the chat. Aram13, thank you for the super chat. Says computer scientist here. Yay. I love computer science. That's fantastic. Says it from bit 0 and 1. Hold on, let me look at it where it from bit 0 and 1, it's a thing. Information theory as a lens is invaluable, often neglected, and roots in the basis of formal logic, which is crucial to empower the word. I'm not exactly sure what you're... So, computer scientist here. And I'm from 0 and 1s, binary. But I don't know what you mean by it's a thing. Information theory as a lens is invaluable. Agreed. And it's often neglected. Agreed. And roots in the basis of formal logic. Agreed. Which is crucial to empower the word. I'm not sure what you mean by the word. Do you mean the word in sort of like the terms of like the Freemasonic sense, as in the fundamental substance of existence? So anyway, here, look. So you're a computer scientist. I think that's awesome. So like computer scientists that work with binary bits or even qubits that have more of an infinite array. You're working in a vector space that has, an infinite array rather than just the binary regular bit. And you can use these bits and qubits to create structures, neural networks, all these sorts of things. So the system that we work in, meta-rationalism, is very similar to this, except instead of having like bits and ones and zeros and binaries, we use sinusoids. So in our system, instead of having bits and ones and zeros to construct reality or information, we use frequencies. So in our position, reality is made from information, but rather being made from bits or qubits, they're made from sinusoidal waveforms generated from Euler's formula. And then we can use these base sinusoids, sine and cosine waves, as sort of like the bits of the universe, because these sines and cosines can be used to construct any waveform, no matter how complex. And through a Fourier transform, frequencies can be projected as space-time information. So essentially, in our system, our bits are sine and cosine waves, frequencies, that interact together to create frequency functions of high complexity. And these frequency functions, via a Fourier transform, are projected as space and time information, which gives us the experience of the physical world and physical domain. Anyway, hi. I just want very cool that you're a computer scientist. Arem13, thank you for another super chat. Says speech, the word, and also the root. Akito says, wow, you lost me with the math. Well, yeah, I know it's actually not that hard to understand. It's kind of, okay, so you know how I said that sines and cosines, sinusoidal waves are so I said sines and cosines interact to form frequency functions and then are projected as space-time information. You can understand this in a really easy way, where is think of Legos. Those plastic bricks. Legos, you can break them all apart into just the simple bricks by themselves, right? But you can combine those Legos into more advanced structures. Same thing with like bricks in a house. If you have a brick house, the house can be broken down into individual bricks. You can take any Lego structure and break it down into the individual bricks. Sines and cosines are kind of like the individual bricks of reality. They're individual frequencies, but you can combine them in such a way that it can create any waveform, no matter how complex, even as complex as the universe itself. So essentially, sines and cosines frequencies are the fundamental frequencies, the building blocks of all existence. Yeah, Desiderium is right. The Neogenian mindset does not 100% require you to know all the mathematical complexities by detail, only that you recognize that reality and mind are mathematical to begin with. Yeah, so if you want to be Neogenian, you don't have to understand all the complex mathematics. Not at all. Not at all. And ultimately, being Neogenian is about wanting to create a new humanity and a new earth through a higher consciousness. So it's about working on yourself and helping others as well. And through that entails understanding reality and understanding yourself better. And you don't have to do that perfectly. So, don't worry if you don't understand all the math. That's okay. You don't need to. But it can certainly be helpful. Arem13, thank you for another super chat. Says frequencies are more accurate for sure, and can be abstracted into bits. Also, it is real was referring to the law of one. Plus agree on all, honestly, and meant my interpretation of the word is speech. Oh, got you. Okay, cool. Yes, absolutely. Frequencies are more accurate for sure and can be abstracted into bits. Yeah, you certainly could. You could model frequency with bits. It would be a very basic model. because frequencies are more complex than bits, since frequencies have, bits just are binary, whereas frequencies, you can vary their amplitude. You can, and really not just a frequency, but we'd be thinking about the sinusoid as a whole, right? So we'd be thinking about the sinusoid, sines and cosines, a sinusoid as a whole. So a sinusoid as a whole has amplitude, frequency, phase. But yeah, you could definitely rudimentary, in a very rudimentary way, model them with bits. Absolutely. Anyway, I find computer science to be absolutely fascinating, especially when it comes to neural networks. Very, very cool stuff. Very, very cool stuff. And yeah, there's a lot of formal logic that is used, for sure. Yeah, fascinating. If I had more time, I would love to study computer science in depth. I think it's very fascinating. I'm glad you were able to come into the stream. Oh, hey, Elise. Thank you for the super chat. It says, I'll post a continuation of the question in the chat. No room here. I've been trying to find your question. Can you post it again? Did you post it? Or are you waiting for me to actually see your super chat before you post it? Oh, okay. So Elise says, like the difference between some of the different books, Old and New, or Gnostic texts, or difference between some of the other gods mentioned in the Old Testament, like El, Asherah, if true, of course. Yeah, so here's the thing. I think that there's a variety of answers to that question. I think that it's possible that some of them may have been channeled. I think that, well, we don't really know. We don't really know if channeling is actually coming from an external entity or if it's coming from a manifestation of one's own mind. We don't know yet. That's still out for debate. So it's hard to say. But that being said, I think that the books are written in diverse ways. I think the books could have been inspired by either an entity being channeled or one's own unconscious. Or it could have also been entering into highly intuitive experiential states, maybe even psychedelic states. And as well, I think some of them were just clearly written as allegory, like just clearly consciously written, like many of the Gnostic texts, like the Gospel of Judas. Like the Gospel of Judas was clearly written by someone who was criticizing mainstream or what would become Orthodox Christianity. So, for example, I don't think the Gospel of Judas was channeled or inspired or anything like that. I think the Gospel of Judas was someone going, hey, I'm going to allegorically critique mainstream Christianity through this gospel. But the big disparities are, yeah, like different consciousness, just different ways of understanding. Absolutely. Like Old Testament is definitely very much that negative orientation. Very much Old Testament is very much that negative orientation. And then you have Jesus Christ, which was the complete opposite. Christ was the total opposite, and I think it's summed up really, really well in the Old Testament. It's an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. And Jesus Christ says, you've heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. And I tell you, if someone slaps you on your right cheek, turn to them the left also. Complete opposite. And Jesus outright is saying, disagreeing with the law. Jesus is disagreeing with the law right there, saying, nope, it's wrong. It's pretty clear that Jesus is against that kind of teaching. Now, turning the other cheek isn't always the greatest thing either. You don't want to get, and this is kind of the idea that I pointed out and Mark talked about as well, sort of the dark Jedi versus the light Jedi, and the gray Jedi being the synthesis. You don't want to go around an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Hell no. But if someone slaps you on your left cheek, you don't want to turn to them to the right also, or vice versa, right versus left. So you don't want people to walk all over you. You want to be able to stand up for yourself. But anyway, yeah, interesting things to think about. Just keep the higher ground. Yes. Always take the high ground. All right, let's see what's the results at. I'm very, very curious. All right, I'm going to let the poll run for 5 more minutes. I'm looking at the time. 5 more minutes. If you want to vote in the poll, vote now, because there are about 400 of you that haven't voted yet. You don't have to vote, but I'm curious. And if you don't know what the vote is and you haven't seen it yet, let me know. By the way, please hit like if you haven't yet, because it helps this information get out there. Close out the live chat for just a minute, hit the like button, then bring the live chat back up. Elise says, I'm still inclined to think it's from the collective unconscious, but even if that, maybe channeling of the different mindsets of human collective groups, and yes, with the goal of coming to a synthesis. Yeah, you never, like, it's so, because there are higher beings, obviously. It would be very, very silly to think that humanity is the highest level. No, there's clearly higher beings, and clearly they exist in ways that we don't fully comprehend right now. Just like, you know, we understand how it could happen theoretically to a certain degree, but the exact, you know, all the intricacies of it, no. But and so they clearly do. So if one is in a meditative state or a trance state and is tapping into the collective unconscious, I mean, you're going to be tapping into the consciousness of other beings as well, unconscious of other beings as well. And all the DMT experiences people have had, that I mean, come on, you have DMT experiences where you meet entities that go, oh, we're so happy you have the technology to get here. We want to teach you things. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. We want to teach you stuff. Here, pay attention. You only have a small amount of time. Let us, like, that's really on the nose. Like, again, we have to be skeptical. We don't know for sure. But that's pretty convincing, you know? That's pretty, and it's crazy to me that this isn't being studied more. DMT and the experiences of DMT. It's like we have, remember, don't do anything dangerous or illegal. But look, there is a substance that allows us to access an entirely new dimension. Like you can just go access a new dimension. Possibly, we don't know for sure, but it seems pretty convincing that that might be the case. And no one gives a shit. Everyone's like, oh, did you see the latest episode of blah, 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 blah on Netflix? Or what's this politician doing? Or it's like, well, what do you not care about the, should we not maybe be concerned about this? Maybe, possibly. So, yeah. There's a lot of stuff out. People need to get their priorities in line. But remember, whenever I talk about psychedelics, I always want to emphasize, remember, don't do anything dangerous, don't do anything illegal, and never feel pressured to do any of this stuff you don't have to. Oman says, is it that they don't care or don't want it public knowledge? Well, people in general should be interested. Philosophers should be interested. Like, I'm only really aware of one philosopher who takes it seriously, and that's my friend of mine, Peter Schustedt H., who's a fantastic psychedelic philosopher and is doing great work in examining psychedelic experiences from a rigorous metaphysical, philosophical standpoint. And he's doing great work in that, in there. But I'm not aware, really, of anyone else who takes it serious to that degree. Terrence McKenna did. But no one else really is. And that's very weird. People should. And by the way, I don't want to give a misconception here. I'm not saying that psychedelics and DMT and stuff like that are the answer to everything. By no means am I saying that. This stream is just a very, like everything we're talking about tonight is very speculative. The UFOs, the UAPs, the law of one, what might be happening, what might not be happening is very, very speculative. And I put DMT in that category as well. It's very speculative. Obviously, you have a very mind-blowing experience. But what exactly is happening is unclear. It seems likely that you're tuning into another dimension. Do we know for sure that's the case? No, we don't. But it seems very likely. The experience, the fractal experience is very close to like a Fourier holography experience. It's very, very damn close. So anyway, you know, I'm certainly not saying that it's the answer to everything, but it's just one of those things where you would think people would be more interested and would want to take a closer look at. But ultimately, what I'm saying is we need to approach these things with logic and reason. We need to approach these things from a rational standpoint. We need to approach these things from a metaphysical standpoint and a mathematical standpoint. So, for example, we should look at the DMT experience and go, okay, what's exactly occurring here? Can we map this out using what we know about Fourier mathematics? Can we break this down using holography? Can we understand how the mind could perhaps be tuning into this by altering its frequency pattern to be within a certain band that allows it to access another kind of veridical experience? So basically, just like physics studies the physical world, relations, Fourier transforms, rational relationships, dynamics, etc. Diana says there are people who are attempting to map out the DMT landscape. Yeah, and that's really cool. But from what I understand, it's no, you know what? There are people who yeah, you're right. There are. I just wish it were a little more prevalent, I suppose. It's getting there. It's getting there. So that's a good point. It's a good point. Yeah. All right, my friends, let's end this poll. Let's see what the results are. Let's see. Wow. Almost 50% think it's real. Did you not hear what I said about robots? Okay, you 50% who say it's real, what are the robots? Tell me. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. I'm playing around. I think it's all very, very interesting. And a lot of it is very compelling. Very, very compelling. So around 50%, 47%. It went down 1%. Someone went, oh yeah, I forgot about the robots. Went down 1%. 47% think it's real. 19% say it's made up. And 34% say a manifestation of the unconscious. Is it just me, or is it that every time we do this, more people say it's real? Interesting. Interesting. Okay, so I'm going to end the poll. Mark says maybe we have more bots in the chat each time. Those are the robots. You're right. Oh, hey, Areem, thank you for another super chat. Says easy route into information theory is Shannon entropy. Okay. Cool. Thanks for joining us, by the way, Arem. All right, my friends, I think we're going to end the chat here. But remember, come in for next week, because next week we're going to be talking about where Ra starts to reveal that Yahweh, the God of what would eventually become Christianity, is from their opinion, Ra's opinion, from Ra's point of view, what Ra says, it is a group network mind from the Orion Empire intent on enslaving humanity. So, interesting things to speculate. Next week is going to be good. Make sure you are there. Make sure that you see it. And I want to give a shout out to our moderators. Our moderators are great, so make sure you go check them out, because guess what? They have their own channels. Check them out. You need to check out the Neogenian Oculus. Check them out. They just had a great live stream on Saturday all about reality tunnels. So check out the Neogenian Oculus. Go subscribe if you want to know more about the Neogenian and what we do. Go check them out. Go check out Jan. Jan has a channel called Jan Damon. They have a fantastic Neogenian channel where they often live stream about world topics going on, pop culture, whatever's happening in the world right now, taking it from a Neogenian lens. Check it out. Great channel. Check out Mark's channel. Mark has a channel that is ASMR, but coupled with very interesting information, and Mark has a fantastic voice. You should go check out Mark's channel. So yes, I see that Jan posted their channel right here. Go subscribe. There it is. Go subscribe to Jan's channel. Go subscribe to the Neogenian Oculus. Go subscribe to Mark's channel. They are all great. Make sure you check them out. All right. I want to shout out, thank you so much to everyone who supported here today. I'll put a link in the chat one more time for my Patreon. If you join my Patreon, you get access to all our members-only videos. We have new members-only videos every single week. Check them out. It's the best way to support my channel, my work. Thank you so much to everyone who supported today. Top super chat was Christopher. Thank you so much, Christopher, for all your support. Holy shit. Thank you, my friend. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Let's see. Again, really, seriously, means a lot, Chris. Like I said, I have run out of ways to say thank you. It really means a lot. I appreciate it. Let's see. Shout out to everyone who supported today with super chats and memberships and stars and all that. Did I forget any star shout outs? I think I did all the star shout outs. Maybe not to Marcus Kanza and Sherry Nicole. Thank you all. So thank you all so very much. I appreciate it. And as always, remember, don't feel obligated to support monetarily. Don't. Stop. I will be mad at you if you do. Do not. Only do it if you're happy to do it. Only do it if you're able to do it comfortably, you feel good about it, you want to do it, you're happy doing it. There are plenty of free ways you can support, like liking and subscribing and sharing and all that stuff. So, yeah. But thank you all so much. New video coming out on Saturday. Well, I'll be live streaming on Thursday, though. Live stream on Thursday. Public live stream and private live stream on Thursday. New video on Saturday. And then another live stream on Monday. We'll see. All right, my friends. Until then, I will see you next time. Ad Astra.